for the stream to come up. There we go. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Good. Welcome to you all. Welcome to the viewers who are attending this satsang online. Nice to have you all here. We have a lot of great questions as always. And as always, there are more questions than we can answer. So I'll apologize in advance if I don't get to your question. And we'll alternate between mostly questions online because there are so many, and then some questions from our local students. Okay, this is all working right. Looks good. Okay, first question from Arjuna, who lives in Seattle, Washington. Arjuna says, talking about Dharma Megha Samadhi in a class on Panchadashi years ago. I have no idea what I was teaching at that time. Dharma Megha Samadhi is a term used by Patanjali to describe really the highest kind of samadhi. I think he identifies 7 different kinds of samadhi, the highest of which is Dharma Megha Samadhi. But in that class, and here's the significant part, the discovery, what I said was, the discovery of your true nature requires a valid means of knowledge, which is to say that your essence as Satchidananda Atma is already present in your experience right now, but it's not fully recognized because of ignorance, covered by the so-called veil of ignorance. What is required to remove ignorance is knowledge. Where does knowledge come from? A valid means of knowledge, a pramana. By the way, be careful. Hindi-speaking people will take pramana as authority. We use it in a technical sense. In Vedanta, pramana does not mean authority. It means a means of knowledge. Like your eyes are a means of knowing form. Like inference is a way of knowing that there's a fire when you only see smoke. So these are valid means of knowledge called pramanas. But in that class, I said meditation itself is not claimed to be a means of knowledge. Patanjali, nowhere does Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras say that meditation is a pramana. He doesn't say that. So Arjuna's question is, what is the role then of Vedantic meditation in Advaita Vedanta during Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana? There are many kinds of meditation. Mostly in Advaita Vedanta, meditation is to get you ready, because a valid means of knowledge only works if you're ready. If your eyes are open, or some people have cataracts, so they need to be, so your eyes have to be prepared for your eyes to see. And here, the scriptures themselves, the words of the ancient rishis, are considered a pramana, a valid means of knowledge. But in order for those scriptural teachings to work, you have to be prepared. Figuratively speaking, you have to have your eyes open, your ears open. But in this case, that's a very simple way of putting it. You have to have an open mind. And to have that, an open mind means a prepared mind. And to have a prepared mind, meditation is crucial. So, role of meditation in Advaita Vedanta, first and perhaps most important, is to prepare your mind for these teachings to go in. I would say that is the primary primary use of meditation. Then a kind of meditation called nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, is also employed later. Later means after you've been prepared through meditation, after you have discovered your true nature using these teachings of Vedanta, after you've removed any doubts through the process we call manana, then we come to the final step of nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, which is a practice. It's a meditative practice, better called a contemplative practice, used to remove habitual identification with your body. So, I've heard you say multiple times that one should meditate with Shravana and Manana. You should meditate to prepare yourself for Shravana and Manana. So meditation is crucial for preparation. So meditation should ideally precede Shravana, hearing these teachings and performing self-inquiry. But in practice, it doesn't work that way. Our lives are not quite so linear. When you were in school, your classes, college, your classes were very linear, right? You had World History 101, World History 102. Then next year it was something 201, and anyway, all of this stuff. That's very linear. Spiritual life is not linear. So it's not like first you meditate and get prepared, then you listen to the teachings of Vedanta. That's just unrealistic. It all takes place at the same time, interwoven, so to speak. Okay, next question comes from Jay in New York. If humans are born with ignorance, how do we know that the revelations of the ancient rishis and Vedas are not a product of ignorance? Human beings, were the rishis human beings or not? Yeah? Were the rishis born with ignorance? Absolutely. There are some mythological stories of somebody getting enlightened in the womb and stuff like that, but those are exceptions rather than the rule. So everyone is born unenlightened, ignorant, including the ancient rishis. So then how do we know that what the rishis taught are not based on ignorance? And finally he says, who has the ultimate authority to decide what is ignorance and what is not? That's a cool question, because the only one who has the authority to determine what is true or not is you. No one else. In other words, I can't say it's true. I do say it is true, but my statement doesn't make it so. You are the final authority, and here's how it works. If what the rishis taught was nonsense, that means everyone who ever followed their teachings would have gotten what? Nonsense. Do you think that through the course of history, at least a few people have studied the teachings of the ancient rishis and gotten enlightened? Seems likely, more than likely. But ultimately, here's the trick. If other people have gotten enlightened using the teachings of the ancient rishis, in principle, you should also be able to become enlightened through these teachings. So, if you commit yourself to using these teachings properly is a big word, but if you really are in the following these teachings as they're intended to be followed, they're intended to be used. If you do that, if you get enlightened, then you yourself have confirmed the authoritativeness and correctness of what the ancient rishis taught. If you didn't become enlightened, tell me which is more likely, that that everyone who claimed to have been enlightened, they're all lying? That's one possibility. The other possibility is you didn't get it. Which is more likely? That everyone who who followed the ancient rishis, everyone who followed Vedanta and claimed to get enlightened, are they all lying? Or is it more likely that you just didn't get it? That's perhaps more likely. So, you are the authority, but you are not omniscient, is the point. You're a human being who is the authority. Okay, next question comes from Stefano. Stefano lives in Spain. And he begins with this really nice statement. After understanding Vedantic teachings properly, the I, meaning ahamkara, says, I am Satchidananda. The ahamkara, we've talked about this before as an enlightened ahamkara, is to use my guru's language. When you define yourself as Satchidananda Atma instead of defining yourself in terms of your body and mind. And he says this is so because the true I, because it is this I who gets knowledge. The ahamkara gets enlightened and not Atma. Atma doesn't get enlightened because Atma is ever free. Really nice. So Stefano has understood this really, really well. Who gets enlightened? Not Atma. Atma is that's your divine nature from, not even from birth, before this birth. So Atma doesn't get enlightened. The mind in general gets enlightened, and the ego in particular gets enlightened. Stefano understands well. In deep meditation, and here's where the question and the problem comes. In deep meditation, where the I only feels awareness, it could get cheated, so to speak, because who is feeling awareness? It may sound confusing because it comes from a state of confusion. In deep meditation, meaning in samadhi, that I, that we call ego, is not present. It's gone. So in deep meditation, you don't have, right now you have a feeling. How does it feel to be you right now? It feels like something, right? What does it feel like in deep meditation? This is tricky. Right now you have a feeling. You are the knower of a feeling, the observer of a mental condition. And that observer is ego, ahamkara. So in deep meditation, that observer is gone. That's our definition of deep meditation. There's no more division between observer and observed, between meditator and object of meditation. The meditator goes away, the observer goes away, the witness goes away. All that remains is consciousness. Now, what does that feel like? That's a trick question. What does consciousness feel like is a trick question, because anything you feel is felt by whom? What you feel is an object. Consciousness is not an object. Consciousness is you, the awareful subject. So, in deep meditation, what do you feel? You feel nothing because there's no, quote, you to have the feeling. Ahamkara has temporarily resolved, is not present. So, he says, but But then who is feeling the I? If the feeling of being I is present, you're not in deep meditation. So anyway, and it goes on a little bit. What I would suggest, as soon as I think to better explore this, the presence and absence. This is coming off. What's this? Let me fix this. Oh, that's fine. Okay. There's a confusion about this presence and absence of I in meditation. And instead of going into this at length here, I would suggest that I've mentioned before the series of videos, The Psychology of Meditation, goes into this in great depth. And Stefano or anyone else who has that confusion about the presence of or absence of I-ness in meditation, that meditation series will absolutely answer your questions. One more question here. This is from Ahmad, who lives in Vancouver. Nice. Ahmad asks, for those seeking moksha, it's clear to me that bad deeds, papa karmas, they generate negative karma and should be avoided. Of course, not just for those seeking moksha, for anyone. Whenever you do a, quote, bad deed, you hurt someone. You know, you suffer a consequence somehow, someday, somewhere. And if you don't suffer that consequence in this life, then you could suffer that consequence in a future life. So for those, even for those not seeking moksha, it makes sense to avoid papa karmas, to avoid hurting others. But for those seeking moksha, there's even a stronger reason, because the so-called bad karmas you commit create obstacles to gaining moksha. Already gaining moksha is not exactly easy for most people, but then to create even more obstacles would be ridiculous. So therefore, one seeking moksha, as Ahmed correctly says, will definitely avoid papa karmas. His question now, though, is, but what about doing good karmas? And he says, is this really advisable? Because I'm inclined to think it would necessitate another incarnation or lifetime to reap the benefits and pay off the good karma. And that, on the surface, is absolutely real, or correct, I should say. And that is, you accumulate karma, good and bad karma, and those karmas go on accumulating, and if you don't exhaust all those karmas in this life, you're going to exhaust them in a future life. That Ahmed's understanding of the doctrine of karma is quite correct. Fortunately, moksha, what a funny expression, breaks the paradigm of karma. To break the paradigm of karma means, and this is a classic example. There's a nice story. I just have to think back a little bit. There's a really nice story that goes with this. So how to consider the fact that according to the doctrine of karma, you've had an infinite number of prior lives in which you've accumulated an infinite amount of good karma, an infinite amount of bad karma. How many lives would it take you to exhaust all of that karma? You get the point. It's pretty messy and definitely not conducive to gaining moksha. How do you get out of it? Well, there's a story. I don't remember the details of the story, so let me just make something up. It's just for fun. Suppose you have a bad dream. In the bad dream, you get really, really angry, and something's going on, and there's a big fight with someone, and you're just going crazy with rage. And suddenly in your dream, a gun appears on the table, and without thinking, you grab that gun, you pull the trigger, bang! And the fellow falls to the floor in a pool of blood. immediately think, oh God, what did I do? You dial 911, the ambulance arrives, the police arrive, they're taking this interview and all of this. They take you to the police station, there are more interviews, then they book you into the jail, and you sit in this jail. In a day or two, you have your arraignment, you show up in front of the judge, then the judge denies you bail, so you go back to prison, and you're in prison for week after week, month after month. Finally, you get your trial. Why trial? You plead guilty. You don't even you plead guilty and you get a life sentence. And you continue in prison, day after day, week after week, month after month, laying on your cot, and thinking to yourself, why did I pull the trigger? Why would I do such a stupid, horrible thing? That's not me. Why did I do that? And then you wake up. It was a dream, right? So when you wake up, what happened to your life sentence in jail? That's what I mean by breaking the paradigm of karma. You arrive at a different understanding, a different level of understanding where karma is not a reality. And this is enlightenment, and that's the ultimate goal. So I hope that answers Ahmed's question. Do we have any questions here? Raise your hands. We'll start in the back. You'll need the microphone, please. I don't think you're visible.
Namaste, Swamiji.
Yes.
All the Mahavakyas imply how an individual being can attain moksha.
I'm sorry, I was distracted for a moment. Say again.
All the Mahavakyas
Yes.
imply how an individual being can attain moksha, enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
How can this profound statement be interpreted for the betterment of the community as against the individuals? Is it just by extension, or is there another interpretation of it?
Is your question, let me see if I understand your question, how can these highest teachings of Vedanta benefit everyone in society?
Yes.
And the answer is they can't. Thank you. So these teachings are not meant for everyone in society. These teachings are meant for individuals who recognize the value of these teachings and who are very committed to these teachings and who have a level of preparation. If you ask how does it benefit society in general, in politics they talk about a trickle-down theory of economics. So a little bit like that. So how does Vedanta help society in general? Well, if Vedanta makes you a better person and you affect other people in society in that manner, Vedanta affects others and helps others. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Another question in back?
I was reading maybe like a couple of weeks ago in the New York Times, an article. I didn't read the entire article, just the title. And it said something like this: intelligence is artificial and love is not. And I was thinking about it. I didn't read the article, but I was thinking about just this statement. And I thought, after some thinking, both intelligence and love are emotions, in other words, are all artificial, but awareness is not. So if emotion can be produced chemically, for instance, but to feel it requires awareness.
That last statement is correct. The problem I'm having with both the article and what you've said is with the word artificial.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are artificial. Your emotions are artificial. How do we define artificial? That which does not arise due to nature is artificial, right? That's a good definition. Anything that arises from nature is not artificial. Is your brain natural or not? Nature. Is your mind natural or not? Now we extend this. Is happiness natural or not? Unhappiness, anger, frustration, greed, jealousy. That's all natural. So this is nature. So, I don't know where the article was going, but let us not call anything here artificial. A computer is something that anything that occurs in a computer's brain, perhaps we can call that natural, but anything that happens in your mind is not artificial. Okay? Another question here?
So everyone keeps saying God is love and this and that, and I get
Not everyone.
Oh, so I get a lot of hate for that when I say that that it can't be, because if you're love, then you can't experience love because you have to be separate from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So who says God is love?
Oh, it just seems
Christians.
Okay.
That is a Christian doctrine.
Okay.
And you're not a Christian.
Correct.
So you're going to have different perspectives. The question then... Oh, thank you.
But I also have a follow-up.
Go ahead, please.
So the thing is that also, isn't love also mithya because it comes and goes? Like people fall out of love as well.
Sure.
So it's not as real either, right? So I can...
Okay. Which is a Vedantic perspective. Is romantic love permanent or not? You get that. That's pretty easy. If it's there at all, it doesn't last long. Of course, when a Christian says God is love, they're not talking about that kind of love. So here's a problem. The Christian uses love in a different way than you use the word love. And if you start having an argument, then your argument is based on a misunderstanding, because they have one meaning of the word love, you have a different meaning of the word love, so your argument is never going to be satisfying because you're not on the same page, as they say. But ultimately, what is the point of such arguments? Wouldn't a mature person acknowledge that somebody else can have a different point of view? And I'll share with you just a beautiful, beautiful statement from my guru. And that is, let me preface this statement. When you argue, it's because you disagree with the other person's point of view, right? So you have a different point of view, and you want the other person to change their point of view to match yours, and they don't. They never do, right? When was the last time you won an argument like that? It doesn't happen. All right. So then you lock yourself into this situation where you're trying to get a person to change their mind. They don't want to change their mind. And how do you feel? You get frustrated. And you don't want to be frustrated. So my guru's response to this is, and let me try to get his exact words. When you give other people the freedom to be who they are, you enjoy inner freedom. Pretty close to his exact words. I'll say that again. When you give other people the freedom to be who they are, you enjoy inner freedom as a result. What a beautiful statement. I love that. Okay.
Just to finish up, though, you said
Microphone?
So you said like romantic love is the one that people, but even regular love though, like it doesn't always last. It comes and goes. Doesn't
Love as an emotion comes and goes.
Okay.
But when a Christian says God is love, they're not referring to an emotion.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Right? So this is the problem. You have one definition of love, their Christian friend has a different definition of love. So that's
All right.
the basis for the discussion is flawed already.
Okay.
Okay, let's take some more questions online. This from Amit, who lives in India. Actually, this ties into something we've just discussed. You've mentioned in Satsang that spiritual problems need spiritual solutions, and psychological problems need psychological solutions. But can knowledge of absolute reality be used to get rid of certain patterns of fear, anger, hate, etc.? Okay, there's a lot, even though it sounds a little simple, there's a lot going on here. Spiritual problems require spiritual solutions, which is to say that Vedanta is not a solution for emotional problems. What are emotional problems? Well, psychologists and psychiatrists have a book this thick called DSM-5, is it now? So, Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, version 5, which gives you an identification, it gives you symptoms and all of the, and what they call differential diagnosis. How's that? For all kinds of mental illnesses, problems, ranging from simple depression to schizoaffective order and all kinds of exotic illnesses. These are psychological problems. Someone with clinical depression or schizoaffective order needs proper clinical help from a professional. And Vedanta does not solve clinical depression. Vedanta does not solve schizoaffective order, etc., etc. And by the way, in that thick book, there are thousands of different diagnoses. These are psychological problems. Fear, anger, anxiety, and hate are emotions. They're not psychological problems. These are emotions. Further, are these emotions natural, or are they signs of illness? If a car is aiming at you, driving 60 miles an hour, and you feel fear, isn't that a good thing? Make you jump out of the way? These are natural feelings, and they're not emotional problems. So when I say emotional problems require emotional solutions, we're talking about what you find in that DSMR, that fat book, which gives all these different diagnoses. We're talking about mental illness. When I say emotional problems, we're really talking about some form of mental illness. By the way, you'd be surprised to know, maybe not, but I was surprised to read an interesting statistic that in this country, in the United States, 1 person in 5 currently suffers from some kind of mental illness. Not in their lifetime. I think lifetime is like 1 in 3. But right now, 20% of your friends, by the way, it's not really a laughing matter, right? Because mental illness is like physical illness. It's an illness. Who wants to be ill? with a physical illness or mental illness. So it's unfortunate, but look how common it is. Hate, anger, anxiety, etc. are normal human emotions. They are not mental illness. One good thing is that Vedanta helps us manage these emotions so much better, because before Vedanta goes in, you get overwhelmed by your emotions very easily. Most people are like that. Strong emotions and you get overwhelmed. But to the extent that these teachings of Advaita go in, so to speak, it transforms the way you think, it transforms the way your mind works, so that you no longer get overcome or overpowered by these strong emotions. So, emotional problems still require emotional solutions, mental illness, but Vedanta certainly can help us manage normal emotions, natural emotions. And there's a very similar question which actually follows here. This is from Swapna. Doesn't say where Swapna lives. Arjuna had an emotional problem on the battlefield, for which he got a spiritual solution. Now, I have to take responsibility for a problem with language, because I have said those exact words. When I've said Arjuna, well, actually he did. Arjuna did have an emotional meltdown, which a doctor would call that panic attack. And I'm sure in that big manual, they won't call it a panic attack, they'll have some fancy term for it. Anxiety response, or I don't know what they're going to say in that big book. So Arjuna indeed had an emotional problem. And Sri Krishna gave him a spiritual solution. But let me get the rest of her question here. So Arjuna had an emotional problem on the battlefield. The emotional problem was not sadness. By the way, Arjuna saw that his own family members were on the other side of the battlefield, and he knew many of them were going to die. Is feeling sad an emotional problem? Or is it normal, natural? Okay, let's understand it. Don't call it a problem. It's a normal human emotion. It makes us human. So that sadness was not an emotional problem. What was an emotional problem is when Arjuna got so dizzy he couldn't stand up. His hands were trembling so much he couldn't hold on to his bow. He couldn't think clearly. That was an emotional problem. That's an emotional meltdown, panic attack. That part was indeed an emotional problem. I have heard you say that emotional problems are dealt with by going to a psychologist. I don't think I used that term. I said emotional problems need an emotional solution. An emotional solution can come by. Are psychologists the only one who can give you an emotional solution? Have you ever had an emotional problem and talked to a close friend and found a solution to your emotional problem? From your friend, you got an emotional solution, right? You didn't get a spiritual solution from your friend, you got an emotional solution from your friend to help you deal with your emotional problem. So Sri Krishna was Arjuna's friend. Indeed, it's true. That's what the Mahabharata shows. And while it's true that the Bhagavad Gita is a spiritual teaching, you'll find in many places Sri Krishna also giving Arjuna emotional support. So we can say then that in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna mostly received spiritual teachings. Arjuna did indeed have an emotional problem, But those spiritual teachings were to address his spiritual problem. The emotional problem he had was addressed by Sri Krishna as a friend, giving him emotional support. I think this would be a better way of understanding Sopna's question. Next question from Shiv, who lives in New York. If I know that Atma is identical to Brahman and unaffected by any karma, then why does my body-mind complex still have to go through prarabdha karma? If you get enlightened, that's what he's saying. If I know that Atma is one as Brahman, not if you have discovered that your true nature as consciousness is in fact limitless, full, complete, the fundamental reality because of which everything exists, which is to say, if you are enlightened. How does enlightenment change your physical body? I think enlightened people, their feet don't quite touch the floor. And according to some these Bollywood movies, Hindi movies, they got light shining out of their eyeballs and ears and all of this stuff. Well, that looks good in the movies, but come on. So enlightenment frees you from suffering. How does that change the body? Not at all. How does it change the mind? Very significantly. Usually, when you feel pain, you suffer. Usually. Is it possible to feel pain without suffering? Surprisingly, it is absolutely possible to experience pain without suffering. We find the stories of saints who lived in our lifetimes. Well, not quite. Ramana Maharshi, lifetime? Not quite. 1950 he died. So I was born 3 years later, so not in my lifetime. That's Ramana Maharshi. And then I'm thinking also of Sri Ramakrishna, who died much earlier than that. So these are fairly contemporary saints. We have written records of people who observed them as they died. And the written records of people who were associated with these two great saints record that they did not suffer. Pain must have been tremendous. They both refused medical treatment. They both died of cancer. They both refused medical treatment. So it must have been a painful death. But the records show they didn't suffer. So it is indeed possible to have physical pain with zero suffering. So if you're enlightened, then who cares about the body and mind? It's not a problem. It's just a fact. And that's what it is to be enlightened. It's just to deal with body and mind as a fact, as part of the world. Body and mind function according to the laws of nature. And the laws of nature might include something about the doctrine of karma. It's easy to extend the laws of nature to include the teachings of karma. So that's perhaps a good way to understand. Next question from Malar, who lives in Coimbatore. Is that the right pronunciation? Malar, in Tamil. M-A-L-A-R. Malar. I don't think, not long, Malar or anything. Okay, I presume that's the right pronunciation. How do I see Brahman in people who are exceptionally and intentionally unkind and rude to me? Those are well said. Exceptionally and intentionally unkind and rude to me. I don't want hatred towards anyone, excellent, But how do I see Brahman in such people? Good luck. Honestly, I don't think that's the solution to the problem of dealing with exceptionally and intentionally unkind and rude people. What would be a better strategy? There's two strategies. The first is pretty obvious, and the first strategy is stay away from them. So that's kind of the pragmatic and obvious solution. My guru used the expression, he had a way with words. Let me try to get his exact words. Some people are prickly like a cactus. You have to love them from a distance. That's good. So for that person who they are prickly like a cactus, stay away whenever possible. When you have no choice but to be related to them, then instead of trying to see them as Brahman, which is a stretch, that's my point. Yes, they are a manifestation of Brahman, as we all are, but it's difficult in such cases. Far easier to understand that people who suffer a lot are more likely to be exceptionally and intentionally unkind and rude. Seriously. If somebody's behavior is that bad, I can almost guarantee you that that person is acting out in that way because they suffer so much. Do you think they're happy? They're just enjoying their life while they're being intentionally rude to you? No, generally, not always true, but in general, people hurt others because they themselves have been hurt so deeply. And my suggestion is this perspective is much easier to gain than that, oh, they are Brahman. That's a stretch to understand that the person is Brahman, but to understand that this person is behaving badly because they're suffering. I don't know if this metaphor works. I've never raised children. I'm not sure I would want to, because I think about a toddler, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, who didn't get good sleep, and they're ornery and cranky and miserable and crying and throwing things and all of this stuff. What to do with that little kid? Well, my strategy would be go away, but if I were the parent of the child, how would I deal with that child? Understanding. Why is that child behaving so badly? They're suffering, correct? And if that's true for the 22-year-old, wouldn't that be true for 22-year-old, 32, 52? I think so. Okay, a couple more questions here. From Ayush. Ayush lives in India. Do you personally believe that Ishvara also has a saguna form and can be seen by some advanced practitioners of bhakti yoga? There's a lot going on in there. Do you personally believe that Ishvara also has a saguna form? Ishvara is saguna, first of all, but doesn't have a particular form. There's a little language problem here. Ishvara is saguna. That is, Ishvara is creator, sustainer, destroyer, right? Those are gunas. Ishvara is karma pala datta. That's a guna. Ishvara is the material cause for the universe. That's a guna. So Ishvara, by definition, is saguna, but doesn't have a human-like form. That would be a good way of putting it. So do I personally believe that Ishvara has a form? Absolutely. In fact, the ancient rishis had lovely poetic ways of describing Ishvara, used often with the word Purusha, where they said the sun was his right eye, the moon is his left eye, his stomach is the heavens, and his feet are the earth. So you look up at, seriously, look up in the night sky, or look at a beautiful mountain, look at a beautiful scene. If you've been with these teachings for a while, how can you not see Ishvara's form? When these teachings go in, it's just so obvious. You're looking at Ishvara. Of course, it's a little harder to see Ishvara in a pile of trash. Ishvara is equally present in that pile of trash, but when you look at something remarkable, how can you not see Ishvara's form? So now the second part of the question, what about the forms that are seen by advanced practitioners of bhakti yoga? I presume this is a reference to seeing like Sri Krishna's form, as an example. So someone who is very deeply on the path of bhakti might have a vision of Sri Krishna. Try this, see if this works for you. The vision of Sri Krishna that you have, if you are that bhakta, you have a vision of Sri Krishna. Where did that particular vision come from? For example, there's a certain shade of blue. Where did that shade of blue, not this shade of blue, how many shades of blue are there? Anyway, notice that in pictures, he's always fairly light blue. But scriptures will often say blue like the night sky, which is dark. When have you seen a dark-skinned Sri Krishna? Well, yeah. That's good. On our altar, indeed. Do I have the button for that? There you go. There is, if you can see that, there's a dark-skinned Sri Krishna on our altar. Of course, marble comes in white and black and some kinds of brown. I don't think marble comes in blue color, so just for practical reasons. But when you see a picture representing Sri Krishna, usually it's a lighter color blue. How do we know that's the color? Is that Sri Krishna's actual color? Now suppose, if we presume that there was a historical incarnation of Sri Krishna many thousands of years ago, do we know what color is, what shade is? And was it really blue? Seriously. If Sri Krishna took a form as a human being, that's what Sri Krishna as an avatar was, a human being. How many human beings have blue skin of any color? Except someone who's got some medical condition. So my point is that an advanced bhakta who has a vision of Sri Krishna, the vision comes from the bhakta and not from, Sri Krishna is everything. Sri Krishna properly understood is not that form that you see on an altar or in a picture, or even in your mind. The form on the altar is a product of is a human creation. The form in the picture is a human creation. The form in your mind is a human creation. Which is not to say it's wonderful. The forms on the altar are wonderful. The forms on the pictures are wonderful. And the form in your mind is more than wonderful. My only point is that these are all forms of human creation. All right. Maybe one more question. A question from Shankar, who lives in Hyderabad. I like this. I am a rational and logic-oriented person. Good. And that's good. I regularly follow your teachings and find Advaita Vedanta very useful in keeping my life peaceful. I've gone through your videos on finding God without faith and how to inculcate bhakti in a highly logical mind, but I still struggle to understand Ishvara on logical lines except as a faith or a belief. I feel developing a new emotion or devotion to bhakti, to Ishvara, is becoming a more difficult task rather than a distraction in my practice of Vedanta. Is there any flaw in my thinking? I request your personal opinion on this. And that's a little, he's asking for my personal opinion, and this is tricky. What is the role of bhakti in the life of a practitioner of Advaita Vedanta? What is the role of bhakti in the life of a practitioner of Advaita Vedanta? First of all, you've heard me say, and I'll say it again, that some kind of bhakti is crucial. Absolutely. Some kind of prayer, some kind of an appreciation that you have a relationship with a greater power from which you came, that sustains you, etc. So at least some rudimentary kind of prayer life or bhakti is required. But now Shankar is asking some more detailed questions about developing an intense emotional relationship with Ishvara, which is what these videos were about. These videos were not about just a rudimentary relationship with Ishvara, but these videos were about how to develop a really powerful, heartfelt emotional connection to Ishvara. And he's asking, what is your personal opinion on this? Here's the problem. Not everyone needs that powerful emotional kind of bhakti. Some do, some don't. There are people for whom that deeply emotional kind of bhakti is crucial. There are others for who it doesn't work for them, and they say, I say some prayers, and I appreciate Ishvara as creator, but I don't. All this emotional stuff doesn't work for me. And there are some people who are even allergic to some kinds of devotional practice. It's not uncommon. Somebody goes, and it's just a funny image. Somebody goes to a Shiva Abhishekam for the first time. They've never seen this before. And then they see the linga, first, not just water, but then milk, then curds, then honey, then panchamrita. There's clumps of gooey stuff coming down on this linga. And some people can get turned off by that. Admit it. Those of you who grew up with that, or in my case, I came to become accustomed to that gradually. But for someone who's had no exposure to that at all, if they spoke American English, they'd say, "That's gross, man." So the point is that elaborate abhishekam might be highly meaningful for you, and might be not at all for someone else. Bhakti is such a personal issue. I mean, there's no one way, which is a good thing. There's no one way to be a bhakta. It really depends on your own emotional makeup. So in response to Shankar's question, what I would say is develop a relationship with Ishvara that's appropriate for you. And the only one who knows what's appropriate for you is you. I have no idea. No one else has any idea. You have to find what works for you and then incorporate that into your life. I hope that answers the question. And this would be a good place to conclude our session. We'll end with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat. See you next time.